Hello, I'm Landon, and I'll be joined by Jeremiah, Maddie, and Autumn. And today we're presenting our strategic recommendations for taking Raising Cane's into the Japanese market. So, from the research we've done so far, we found that global foreign direct investment has reached a record-breaking $41 trillion. This is a clear message for a fast and high-growing brand like Raising Cane's to expand internationally, since it's necessary for our long-term scale and brand awareness. We have identified Tokyo as our primary target because it aligns perfect with our company's strengths and business model. Our primary objective is to capture a first mover advantage. So while other US companies like Chick-fil-A have not entered into the Japanese market yet, we can establish ourselves as a premium choice. In addition, with 92% of the population living in urban areas, we are entering a market that's tailor-made for our efficiency. So our goal today is to show you that we can bridge the gap between our iconic One Love saying and the culture demands of the Japanese consumer. So now I'm going to be talking about our SWOT analysis and PESTEL analysis. So to understand our recommendations, we have to look at it from a couple views, which is like the specific rules and cultural norms that define the Japanese market. Internally, Raising Cane's has a unique strategic advantage, which is our simplicity. In Japan, there is a deep cultural respect for the mastery of a single craft. So by focusing strictly on chicken fingers, we can align with our expectations with the specialized quality. Our simple operations allow us to maintain high standards in Tokyo that we have in the US as well. We will address our weaknesses as well, which are a limited menu that can challenge and cause problems in a market that loves season variety, and we are sensitive to trade fluctuations as well. However, we see a massive opportunity in Japan's youth culture. A trend called Oshikatsu, which is defined as extreme fan support, is currently driving the Gen Z purchasing right now in Japan. So if we can turn these fans into Cane's famous Kaniak saying, we can create brand loyalty that goes far beyond just a simple meal. The country environment. So looking at the country through a PESTEL analysis, Japan is culture but a demanding market. Legally, regulatory quality is the number one driver for success right now. We have to be ready for strict safety audits and protective labor laws. Economically, we are facing a shrinking work age population, which has dropped from 70% down to 60%, meaning that we'll be competing hard for labor. And culturally, Japan has a high uncertainty avoidance, so customers trust brands that are going to be consistent and clean. We also must respect Japan's 2050 zero carbon mandate that they're planning to use. Our plan integrates the Moatani philosophy, which means treating waste reduction as a core value to earn trust of our local community. And finally, with our competition and strategy. Our competition is strong. KFC Japan is currently aiming for a 30% growth by 2030, and there's convenience stores called Kobanis that sell fresh chicken on a daily. So our strategy is not to compete on price with these companies. We want to position Raising Cane's as a premium American experience. We are offering a level of quality and brand identity that these convenience stores and KFC cannot match. If we blend our operational standards with a deep respect for Japanese culture, we aren't just entering a market, but we're going to build a sustainable competitive advantage over these companies.
Of course, so we try to decide what would be the best entry for Raising Cane's to expand to Japan. And we decided that joint venture would probably be the best option and most beneficial for them. So the three things I'm going to talk about is why it's beneficial, the goals on how they align with each other on Japan and Raising Cane's, and the risk for the strategy, but how they can adapt to it. So obviously the first one is why is it beneficial? So first is having a reliable local company can give you knowledge just off of policy, regulation, laws, consumer preference, anything that can give you started, especially from a new market standpoint, which is a different culture, which we'll talk about later. Which in a joint venture, it reduces risk, it reduces financial risk, it reduces everything. It's shared rewards, everything. It will help with Raising Cane's to expand to Japan, which this local company also helps out with a faster market expansion. Okay, so basically, if they didn't have this, strategy, it'd probably take them years for them to get operations started and be efficient with from a new market standpoint. So now I'm gonna talk about goals on how they align with each other. So Japan has expectation when it comes to trust, especially when it comes to a new foreign fast food restaurant, we'll say, and just as Raising Cane's. And Raising Cane's wants to build trust from the consumers, so it has to be credibility from a local standpoint. Having a local company and doing what they say, being adaptive, can build the trust for the company, and it's one of those things that customer service is important to them. And next thing we're talking about is quality and consistency. Raising Cane's is very particular on what they do. They have like 4 options on their menu. They have a limited menu, but they're very consistent on it. They make sure it's fresh. They make sure it's served right, and it's one of those things. It's chicken fingers, fries, bread. That's their options, and the quality. I know Japan is very particular on, they rather have quality over quantity, and it's nothing wrong with at all, which is the consumer preference, but also they also like the customer experience, which I think Raising Cane's can fit all these together just off of the slogan is one love and one community on the bottom right. They're big on community. They care about their customer experience. They want make sure that they are welcomed, especially from a new market standpoint. Everyone's welcome. But having all this, there's going to be some risk, especially coming from a new market standpoint, which the risk, high operation costs. We believe that there's going to be high operation costs since it is coming from a new market, but since it's a joint venture, it's going to go down since it is you're partnering up with a reliable company, and which the next one is supply chain disagreement, which I believe that supply chain disagreement and also culture differences kind of work with each other, since you're going to have disagreements. It's not going to be perfect, especially when it comes to decision making or anything that involves making change. And there's going to be disagreements, but I believe that if we communicate on what to do, we communicate when it comes to decision on why I feel this way and why I feel that way, I feel like that would be the best option to do.
All right, looking at the supply chain logistics of the operational plan for Raising Cane's, they will balance their one love culture with high food standards that are present in Japanese culture. So when it comes to sourcing their poultry, Raising Cane's has a fresh and never frozen policy, so they will be sourcing that domestically. And then when it comes to their proprietary items, they will choose to import those from the US. That would be your flour and spices. And then because Japan has strict regulations on imported potatoes, we will source those locally. And then to maintain freshness, we will use local bakeries to source our Texas toast. And then Japan has a very strict 1/3 rule where food must be received within the first third of its freshness date. So that's going to require more frequent shipments and contracting with a local cold chain delivery partner, which is going to bring up the costs slightly for them. Now looking at some of their partnerships and logistics, they're going to be adopting a digital first strategy. This will be noting their chronic labor shortages. So as you see on the right, we have those mobile ordering kiosks and the pickup stations. On a restaurant level, they're going to be staffing with local Japanese employees to apply traditional hospitality standards into their practices. And then in the first 12 months, US managers will be employed in these Japanese locations to help train new employees and ensure that they're operating within the expectations. This will take into account the differences in Japanese etiquette, which will require several adaptations from the US model. And then finally, after 12 months, US managers will perform periodic audits on these Japanese locations just to ensure that things are operating within consistency. And
thanks, Maddie. Now we'll go into our target market. Our target market are youth and trendsetters in Tokyo. So you can see on the screen we have an example of some influencer girls. These would be our primary target audience, the people that can create a Caniac fan culture in Tokyo. So to do that, we'll focus on our placement in Shibuya. Shibuya is a trend-setting district located in the heart of Tokyo where locals go to try foreign foods and post about their experience and in general just have a fun time in a trendy environment. And we'll stick with our core products, as Jeremiah said, just our chicken fingers, Texas toast, fries, and coleslaw, just the base of our brand to get this Americana feel into Tokyo. We have to stay to our core roots and stick with consistency. But then to promote our product, we're gonna do some more fun things. As you can see on the far right, there's the picture of the dog and the arches. This shows a potential public relations campaign where we do a big launch and we go into it from there. We can also do fun social media campaigns, as we'll see in the next slide. So the next slide, you can see an example of a promotional campaign that we'll have. This is a robot dog of our mascot, the yellow Labrador Raising Cane. So Raising Cane, as a food delivery dog, would have limited functionality. It can't serve the whole mobile ordering district of Tokyo. That's impossible. But having these limited edition experiences drives demand, and our brand story is on full display here with the logo and the mascot. You can clearly see Raising Canes going down the street, and you can see a fun Instagrammable experience that would be highly postable for these opinion-leading and trendsetters that we're targeting. Then with the next slide, you can see that we have an example of Japanese cultural adaptations. This is a ponzu sauce, which is a Japanese citrus sauce. This represents a small adaptation that we can make so that we keep our streamlined menu of our 4 core offerings while also customizing the product just a little bit to make it high demand, make it limited, but also keep it Japanese. And this is going to be part of our joint venture participation. By participating in a joint venture, we'll find opportunities for these little crossovers like the ponzu sauce that really make our product special. So then now you'll see on the next slide our finances. So starting with our startup costs, we have around $2.43 million in startup costs. That's in US dollars, and that covers the move-in fees, which can be quite high in Japan, especially in these trendy districts. This covers setting up the infrastructure, staff training, and all things along that nature. Setting up the supply chain too, and the initial advertising costs. Next, you'll see our $714,000 in operating costs per year. These operating costs represent paying rent, utilities, and going down the line, just day-to-day operations keeping up. That also represents our cost of goods and services. But then you can see in the green that we have $7.3 million per year in expected revenue just from our one flagship location in Shibuya. This represents the revenue, assuming that we sell 2,000 meals a day, which is pretty realistic for a high volume store, and especially since Raising Canes can pump out a lot of meals quickly because of their limited menu. So then we're gonna talk about our CSR recommendations with Maddie next.
all right, so looking at their CSR recommendations, as we have mentioned in past sections, Japan has a very large value set towards waste reduction and recycling. So we're going to be basing many of our practices on their regulations that they have standard. One regulation that is going to be a major precedent for us is the Promotion of Food and Waste Reduction Act, which aims to reduce 60% of waste by 2030. We will be acting on those standards as well. So Raising Cane's limited menu reduces inventory loss. However, their high volume frying creates a significant amount of oil waste. So we're going to aim to reduce that, but we're also going to partner with a local waste disposal company who will be able to mitigate some of these levels. And then the GX Promotion Act is requires that companies reduce and report their emissions. So that will mean that we need to optimize our supply chain delivery routes, which will ultimately reduce those emissions. And then packaging is going to take a shift from the plastic and styrofoam that you would generally see used in the United States to PET, starch-based, or biomass packaging. Now, looking at some of their social responsibilities, Japan has very strict health and safety laws, including a 40-hour work week, strict overtime pay, protection against dismissal, and then mandatory paid leave. And then we're going to be adapting Japanese hospitality, which is known as omotenashi, into all of our employee training, which will see some major differences from the United States. And then finally, in the United States, we show local support by supporting over 30,000 local companies, and this is going to be adapted into the Japanese culture by participating in local festivals and supporting local farmers. Thank you for watching our presentation on Raising Cane's entrance into Japan.